Jesus didn't have a problem with people that's in the streets. He had a problem with religious people.
How can I help anybody when I was not even able to help my own son?
I would never do that. And I became that in a matter of minutes when they took my pain pills away.
And I said, I'm not where I want to be, but thank God I'm not what I used to be.
This is Faith in Your Recovery. I am Randy Davis. Welcome to the battle. Welcome to Season 2 of Faith in Your Recovery. We're glad you've joined us. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, sharing it with us. Our goal is to touch on all things recovery. I have a guest here with me today. Her name is Kristen Smith. I'll introduce her to you and let her tell her story here in just a few moments. But we get the struggle, the challenge, the stigma. We get that sense of loss, just whether we're your first choice or your last chance, we don't care. We're here to serve you. We're here to encourage you, to build you up. A Better Life, Brianna's Hope, is our umbrella for Faith in Your Recovery. We're a support and recovery movement, a participant-driven, faith-based, compassion-filled support and recovery movement. Thanks for being with us today. Kristen, welcome to Faith in Your Recovery.
Thank you.
Hey, it's good to have you with us. We look forward to hearing your story, your history, your present, your plans for the future.
Well, it's good to be here.
All right. So let's go ahead and get started here. Tell the folks where you're at in life right now, what your career is about, what your personal outreach ministry, however you may label it. Share that with folks, would you please?
Okay, yeah. So I am the director of a women's transitional house called the House of Shiffra. I've been doing that for about 4.5 years now. After struggling with my own addiction, I wanted to have a career in helping other women find a way out and find hope. And I know if I can do it, that they can do it. And I also work for Turning Point as a peer recovery coach, and that kind of goes hand in hand with, my goal in life is to help people get sober.
So go ahead and share with the folks what the House of Shiffra is, what that means, how it got its name, and the importance of that. Would you please?
Yeah. So I was on the streets, addicted to drugs, and my grandmother is a pastor of a church out here in Anderson, and she wanted me to come home, and she figured if she opened a house, she could get me to come home. And when I first got to the House of Shiffra, she told me, we were talking about the meaning of it, and it was from the book of Exodus in the Bible, and it was, a spiritual midwife back in the, days when Pharaoh was murdering the baby boys that were born, and the Shiffra was a spiritual midwife that would, go and hide the baby and help raise it so it didn't get killed. And she joked with me. She said, I wanted to name it Kristen's house, but she didn't do that. But I love it. It's different. We're a 12-step based house, but we're also faith-based too.
Awesome combination there.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for that work and what that means to the community, the lives you've touched, changed, and helped to save, I'm sure. So you say the house has been up and running 4+ years, or that was just your involvement with it?
So I have been sober. It'll be 6 years in March.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. And the house opened probably 6 months before I got sober. My grandma would, she opened the house, and then she would tell me about it, being opened, and ask when I was going to come. And I wasn't ready, and it took me hitting my bottom. And when I finally got to the house, it was a 6-month program at the time. I completed the 6-month program. And then I took over as like the house manager, and my grandmother was actually, she's so busy with her ministry, her church that she runs, she was going to, shut the house down because she didn't have time. And that's when I stepped up and I said, I want it. I want to take over for you. And that's exactly what I did. And we've been going strong ever since. And we have a house full of girls now. And it's awesome seeing people come in completely broken and hopeless and watching them just develop into the woman that they're supposed to be.
Is it still a 6-month program, basically?
So we're when I first moved in, we were a halfway house, just a halfway house. Now we're called a transitional house for women. I get a lot of women from prison, a lot of women from work release, things like that. And it's a 90-day program. But after 90 days, you're welcome to stay as long as you want to. But you get a certificate of completion. And, within those 90 days, you have to work the 12 steps and keep a job and pretty much learn how to live life not in a recovery house.
Yeah. Can you explain to us the difference in it being a halfway house and what it is?
So I guess the only difference is it allows the girls a little more freedom than they would have if it was just a halfway house. Transitional meaning transitioning back into the society. It's more short term than a halfway house would be.
Okay, at full capacity, how many girls is that?
I've got 14 right now.
Is that pretty full up?
Yeah, we're looking to expand. We're looking for another facility. That's our goal, is to find another facility and expand.
So the house is located here in Anderson, is that correct?
Yes.
And if the folks know of someone with a need or someone who might be interested, how can they get a hold of you?
So I usually just give out my personal cell phone number. I get calls all day long, for women, needing a bed, or I get a lot of phone calls for women that aren't drug addicts or alcoholics. And that's what's cool about working for Turning Point, is I have the resources to help direct them into somewhere else that fits them. So
you can just almost change hats on the spot and have help for them. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, we want to hear more about some of those victory stories after a while.
Okay.
Know you'll have limits for their privacy, but I'm sure there's enough you can share that the folks will be inspired to hear that. But let's hear about your story. You made a comment there a little bit ago, until you hit your bottom. What was your life like? What did it look like before you got to your bottom? Your struggles, your losses. Can you share some of that?
Yeah. So I started I smoked weed all my life. I drank, all my life since I was about 13 years old. And I had my first child at 17, my second child at 19, and my third at 21. After me and my children's father broke up, I was about 23 years old, and I started hanging out with the wrong crew. I got involved with some people that were doing opiates, and that's where I started. My grandmother found out about me being on drugs, and she found my first recovery treatment center to go to. And so I went to treatment.
Did you go to treatment because you wanted to, or because the pressure that she put on it, combination?
So the treatment center was in Florida.
That's not all bad, except for today's weather. That's
why I went. Just kind of escape reality and move to Florida. I thought it was going to be all great. And it was great for a while. And then I wasn't ready to get sober. And I ran from that rehab. I met a guy at rehab, and I left with him and ended up in Columbus, Georgia. I got hooked on meth while I was in Georgia, and that became my drug of choice. That became my best friend. And during this period, I didn't really have anything to do with my family or my kids or anything. I did a lot of things that I wouldn't have ever done if it wasn't for the drugs.
Was that by your choosing, your separation with the family, or did they separate from you?
That was my choosing.
Okay, thank you.
My grandmother was always there for me through all of it. She had my children and always reminded them that I loved them, and she didn't really get involved with Al-Anon, but she started to research addiction and kind of find out a little bit about it. And this went on for about 5 years or so. And my bottom was me being homeless on the streets in Indianapolis and stealing cars and robbing people and just being a horrible person in general. And I got arrested March 10th of 2017 for auto theft. And I've been sober ever since that day.
Okay. How did that play out, the arrest? Did you serve time because of that?
So God is awesome. The man whose car I stole, he got his keys, he got his car back, and he decided not to press any charges. So I didn't get any felonies. I have a clean record. I have had a lot of people praying for me, my grandmother included. And I've always been a Christian, so I've always had the Holy Spirit talking to me through all of it. And I honestly think that it's the grace of God that I didn't get charged with that.
That's not always the story.
Right, right.
You and I and our folks out there listening all know that. I've heard of a lot of jailhouse religion, and I believe in possibility.
Yep.
I don't believe it's real for everybody, but case raw on that one. Regardless, he gave you a chance far beyond what you deserved.
Yep.
And far beyond what anybody deserves. But the thing was, you chose to take advantage of that blessing and turn it into something mighty and powerful.
Yep.
So tell us how you came up from that bottom, okay? The bottom can oftentimes be a springboard to send you upward. So tell us about that.
So once I entered the house of Shiffra, I had in the back of my mind, I really didn't know if I was ready to get sober. I was kind of undecided, but I wanted to give it a chance. I decided I was going to surrender everything and make the best of it. And once I got to the house, I met the girls that lived there, and I started going to AA and NA meetings, and I found out that I really, really enjoyed being with a lot of other like-minded people. I wasn't any different from the problems I had weren't any different than the problems they had, and we could all relate, and they were all trying to better themselves just like I was. So that really inspired me to do better. And so I gave it my all. I stayed off drugs. I got a sponsor. I started working the 12 steps, doing service work. I built a relationship with my higher power. And that's ultimately what has kept me sober this long, and I love it.
As you were talking there, you said you could relate to the others who were there. To me, that can sometimes mean it's like looking in a mirror. You see that person who's lived your story, and you see how they're climbing out of that hole and finding the light, and that reflects in you and probably drives you forward to get where they're at and to continue to go, and that's what you've done. So as you came up out of that, as you started to find your recovery, as you came into that relationship with God, and he blessed you in so many ways, that led you to the house of Shiffra. What has your leadership role there been like? And if you would, share some of those victory stories you've seen in, the other gals there.
Yeah, so my leadership role there, starting out, before I took over as director, I was the house manager, and I was taught how to do drug screens and do admissions on people, and make sure chores were getting done, things like that, and then once I took over as director, my role was still kind of the same. I just had a lot more responsibility piled on top of it, which I like all the responsibility because ultimately it helps me stay sober. And I have a lot of success stories, and then I have a lot of girls that haven't been so much successful, and I allow second chances, third chances. If somebody hadn't given me that second, third chance, I probably wouldn't be alive today. And I have a bunch of girls who have completed the program and have graduated and now still are a part of the house. And we have house meetings every Sunday evening, and they still come to all of those, and they like to be involved. And it's awesome to see them getting their kids back and keeping a job. And because we're not the same people when we become sober, when we learn how to live a new life, we're not that same person anymore.
Better not be, had we?
Right. And my goal is to help people get sober, but my ultimate goal is to lead people to Jesus.
Amen to that. So, all that you've been through, all the folks that you've had come and go through House of Shiffra, how do I best word this? What has had the most impact on you? Those who have been there and then stumbled and fell, maybe lost to overdose, death, or the victories, or each one still takes a toll, I'm going to guess.
So I've had a lot of losses as far as women and men in recovery. I feel like I've lost more people since I've been sober to overdoses than I ever did when I was in active addiction. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And even the people that I've had, not complete Shiffra and not do so great, the girls that I do have complete it and the girls that I do have success with make it all worth it,
One victory makes it worth a lot of losses, though nobody wants to lose a friend, a loved one, or even a stranger. Addiction takes its toll for certain. What kind of advice could you give to folks who have a family member that's struggling with addiction? How would you caution them, and how would you encourage them?
Well, don't ever give up on them. Just love them. And I've had, issues. Me, for example, when I was in active addiction, I was great at manipulating people to get what I wanted, whether I would tell my family, hey, I don't have any money for food, or I don't have any money for whatever. And, I would just make up stories so I could get money to go and get my drugs. And some family members don't catch on to it. They feel bad, but that's just enabling them. So my advice, just love them, pray for them, don't enable them. Just don't give up on them. Once they're ready for help, they'll ask for it.
I don't know if there is an answer to this next question, but I would at least like your opinion, okay?
Okay.
How do we know when we are enabling? Where is that line?
So, for example, just this past weekend, I took a friend of mine who reached out for help. I took him to a treatment facility, and while I was there waiting to get him checked in, there was a woman that came in, a mom, and she was talking about her son. My husband runs a men's facility, so that's where I'm going with this. She was talking about her son, and my husband was trying to talk to her about his facility, and she said, well, do they take insurance? And he said, no, he'd have to get a job and do this on his own. And she said, well, he can't do that. Like just certain instances like that, like let them stand up on their feet and put the footwork in and do this for themselves. Just be there for them while they're trying to do it, and sometimes letting them suffer. It's hard because that's your loved one and you love them, but sometimes letting them suffer is the only way that they're going to hit their bottom.
We have to make each other accountable, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah, and allow responsibility even if it's failed, because the next time maybe you just found the way to climb above it.
Yep.
And until we do. Awkward, again, not sure how to ask, but what was the comment you would hear most often during your struggle that would just burn your tail the most? Somebody thinking they're giving you advice and they're just not very wise with that advice.
Oh, why can't you just stop? That's probably the biggest one. Some people that don't understand addiction, they ask, why can't you just stop doing the drugs? Why can't you just stop drinking? Because it's an allergy and I can't stop. It's out of my control. It's a choice for me until I pick up that first one. Once I pick up the first drink or drug, I'm off to the races and my mind is gone, and it becomes an obsession at that point. So until you get some sort of treatment or start getting sober, get off the drugs, stay off the drugs, it's just going to be an obsession.
I started in this kind of work about 8 years ago, and I can't begin to tell you how many times I was told that. Why don't you tell them to just stop? And my response would be, they wish they could.
Yeah.
If it was that simple, we wouldn't be here today even talking about it. We'd have this thing beaten, okay? Mm-hmm. Because I've yet to meet someone who has said, when asked as a fourth grader what they want to be when they grow up, and the answer is an addict.
Yep.
I've had the privilege to go into several schools, elementary through high school, and I've yet to meet someone who wanted to be an addict or someone who's been happy in their addiction. If you could get over to snap of a finger, their fingers would be raw trying to get over it. So we've just got to tune in to know it's a disease. And you touched on it. My thoughts have always been, yes, it's a disease, but it's set off by a choice. Mm-hmm. That first use, and I've always said there's no such thing as experimenting. It can be one and done with the fentanyl today and everything, or at least it can own you after the first try. And there's not a one of us big enough, bold enough, strong enough to just, boom, once it grabs us, to let it go. That's for certain. What do you want folks out there to know? To know about the struggle, to know about finding victory. Give them a process maybe for somebody who's wanting a formula. And I know it's not a magic formula that works for everybody. The first couple, 3 steps toward recovery look like what?
So for me personally, I had to admit that I was powerless over the drugs or the alcohol. It is a choice until I take that first one. After that first one, it's not a choice anymore. So I'm powerless over that first one. And finding a higher power, giving your life over to that higher power and asking for his will and not your own, whatever your higher power might be. And really getting honest, finding a sponsor and getting honest about the things you've done and finding your part in, resentments or anything like that. Usually a resentment is the number one reason a person relapses, being mad at someone. And for me, any resentment that I've had in life, I've always played a part in that. And so I have to recognize what my character defects are and pray and ask God to remove those from me. And they're not gone today still, but I recognize it when I'm doing it.
That's the key,
yes.
Isn't it, to stay above it all?
Yes.
And I liked your term there, we've got to be honest.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter what side you stand on with any kind of substance use disorder, addiction, label it as you will. You have to be honest with yourself. Yep. And that's all of life, whether you're into that or not.
Yep.
In relationships, we've got to be honest. And wow, that's a big part of it. And certainly I believe with all my heart that higher power.
Yes.
Mine is God, through Christ.
Yes.
And I
Mine
know it
too.
is for many, and you've already expressed that. And that is where the strength and the peace that passes all understanding comes into play, and we can draw on that. We're not here, folks, to tell you there's one way to do this. We're here to tell you there are different options, but you bring God on board with you. All those options, I believe with all my heart, work better. I've often been asked, can it be done without God? I believe it can. I just don't believe it's going to be nearly as successful. I know there are those who battle that. That's okay. But that's where I stand with it. What kind of advice would you give to that person right now who says, I'm listening, but this means nothing to me. I am not ready. Everybody tells me I should be, etc. What would you give advice to? What would be the advice you'd give to that individual who hasn't started toward recovery?
What do you have to lose?
Compared to what you have to gain, right?
Yeah.
And they may not even be ready to see what they have to gain, but they know what they have to lose.
Yeah.
Because they've already, maybe nothing because they've already lost it all, right?
That's how it was for me. I had already lost everything. I was living out of a duffel bag that kept getting, all my stuff got stolen from me everywhere I'd go. And I literally came to the house of Shiffra with the clothes on my back. And I didn't have anything to lose. That's why I said, you know what, I'm going to give this a shot, and I'm going to surrender everything and just give it 100%.
And I'm going to guess you never dreamed of being in that place, homeless, having nothing to your name. Nope. And struggling and hunting for the next meal and having to do what you had to do to get that meal or that shelter. Mm-hmm. That had to be dark times that you never dreamed of.
Yeah, at the end of it, I was living in abandoned houses. I was waiting outside of McDonald's for people to throw their food away so I could see if there was any leftovers. I would steal from the grocery stores. That's when I was eating, but I was on meth, so I really didn't eat or sleep very much. But when I did, that's how I did it.
Yeah. So, Kristen, what are your plans for the future? Professionally, personally, what's one of those things on your wish list?
Wow. The sky's the limit now at this point, you know. I'm just trying to follow the plan that God has for me and taking it day by day. And I never, ever thought I'd be working, you know, helping save people's lives like I am and being a peer recovery coach. And I never even imagined that, you know, when I was younger, like I wanted to be like, I don't know, a school teacher or something, and nothing to do with recovery. I didn't understand it. But now that I understand it, I wouldn't mind, you know, going back to school and being a recovery like counselor, you know, getting like a therapist license also on top of it. That would be awesome.
But your heart and your passion's going to remain in that field of recovery, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
you can't keep it without giving it away.
Oh, yes. That's such a fact in so many areas. As you recall, the name of our podcast is Faith in Your Recovery. What do those 4 words mean to Kristen?
Faith in your recovery. I don't know how to answer that one.
It's all right. Take your time.
I don't know. I like it because you have to have faith in your recovery to be in recovery. If you don't have faith in it, then it's non-existent. It's not going to happen.
If you don't believe that it can happen, it's not going to happen because you're going to sabotage yourself again, right?
Yeah. And I've had a lot of girls in the past that do so good, and then they are doing so good that they end up sabotaging themselves because I don't know if they're afraid or what the deal is, but they must not have faith in their recovery.
Success can be scary.
Yeah.
A lot of people who live in self-invoked misery at least know what to expect. But what's it going to be like if I move away from this and move into a new lifestyle? To those of us who haven't battled the issue in the same way, it doesn't make sense. But when you look at it, I get it. There's comfort sometimes in our pain, as much as we don't like to deal with it. So is there anything else you'd like to add here today? Anything you'd like to say or share that we haven't touched on?
I guess the only other thing, if you want to get sober, reach out and find help to change your people, places, and things, because I wouldn't have been able to get sober if I wouldn't have done that. And I still have people in active addiction that I care about and that I pray for, but until they're ready, I'm just leading by example.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for the privilege of sharing with you in this interview. God bless. We hope the very best for you. Folks, we know you've not come this far to only come this far. Thanks for joining us today. Continue to follow us on your favorite podcast platform or shoot us an email at podcast@ablbh.org. And above all, remember, don't give up on yourself or others, and don't give in to the urge. Your answer, your healing, your recovery may be just around the next corner or perhaps in our next episode. Believe and keep fighting the battle. God bless.